What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Yours Truly podcast. I'm Christian Baxter, and I am your host. Today, we have Miles and Rebecca Meyers in the Yours Truly virtual studio. I got an email, or did I see this on Discord first, of a link to a video on a new YouTube channel that is choosing to associate themselves with this little corner of the internet. Miles and Rebecca Meyers from Oklahoma, their channel called Our View from the Plains. And I got an email after shortly seeing that video from Neil Daedalus, who was just on the podcast, saying, hey, check out this couple and what they're doing. Maybe you might think having them on Yours Truly might be a good idea. And I did think it was a good idea. And I'm just going to read their channel description here. It says, well, first I'll say they were at Midwest Estuary at the conference in Chicago from a few weeks ago with John Vervaeke and Paul Vanderklay and Jonathan Peugeot and Elizabeth Oldfield and Gail Zeldin, kind of hosted by Estuary in this little corner of the internet. And so, yeah, here's their channel description. Our View from the Plains is about living the Christian life with deep roots. Fathers leading with love, homes built on prayer, and families learning to see both the visible and the invisible world around us. From supper at the table to the sacraments at church, we talk about how ordinary households can live with holiness, hold fast to tradition, and keep the faith alive in a culture that often forgets the sacred. This is Our View from the Plains. Come join us as we seek, learn, and live the faith together. So they have put out an introduction video 3 weeks ago. They haven't done anything since, but we'll count this as kind of maybe a second video of their foray. What is the word? Foray into this little corner of the internet, to YouTube and beyond, into digital communion of such. So I'm excited to connect with them, hear their story. They shared some of it, but to kind of dig into that, their hopes for what they're doing on the internet, their thoughts on the conference, and kind of how they found themselves here, and just continue to see where the story goes. So without any further delay, I give you Miles and Rebecca Meyers, Our View from the Plains. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. All right, everybody, we are recording, and this is Miles and Rebecca Meyers, correct? And
correct.
So, I was framing this, how we got connected was Neil sent an email. Y'all had put out a video after attending Midwest Estuary. And, I've told this story, and I was telling y'all backstage, I was like, sometimes you say something, you feel like you say it over and over again, and someone maybe hears it for the first time, the 10th or 20th time you do it. But, when I came looking at the corner, I didn't know it existed beyond like the substrata of below PVK, like Peterson and Peugeot and Vervaeke and Paul, like I knew all about that for years, but not like that there was like kind of this thing simmering underneath. And so when I came in, I was like looking at something that was already real, and the people in it were kind of like, is this real? I'm like, no, this is real. I can see it. Like, and I'm going to be a student of this thing, and I'm going to try to like look and see what's going on here. And it became very apparent through a conversation I had with Chad. He's like, you got to watch the Randos. I was like, what's this is like almost 2 years ago now. And so I went and watched a few. I watched Grim Grizz's and another guy, and I've watched several since, but I became very clear that was the kind of the heart underneath what was going on, underneath the ideas that were being discussed were the people and actual real. And this is part of Grim Grizz's thesis of tear down that fourth wall, Mr. Gorbachev, which is YouTube being the silver screen that we are enamored by inherited from its big brother, TV set, the cell phone screen or the computer screen. And there's kind of the fourth wall, the Jim Halpert, all of a sudden he's looking at the camera on The Office. I don't know if y'all were, and it's like, oh, so in the personal nature of this, and these kind of conversations of getting to know the person's is the heartbeat underneath the substrata of this little corner of the internet. So in that spirit, I will open and ask y'all my first question, which is the magic question, which is, tell us about the homes you grew up in, and then how we get to this place today.
Yeah. I'm gonna let you go first.
Me first?
Yeah.
Okay. I grew up very Southern Baptist, very traditional. Yep. Grandpa's was a Southern Baptist preacher. And if he could stand long enough, he'd still be one today. Very confused most of the time on how to relate the feeling of Christianity with the knowledge of Christianity, I feel like is a good way to put that. And just working with, okay, I am this Southern Baptist thing. I play by the rules. I never question. Like I was not a questioner. Even when we met, I was very, no, this is what you do. You're a good person. You go to church on Sunday and Wednesday, and every time the doors open at the BCM in college, like this is just the right thing to do. And the only way that I can be a Christian is this. And I met this guy. My family growing up was, I want to be careful with how I say that, but very fundamentalist, I guess. It's do the right things, say the right things, just don't mess up. And if you do, shove it under the rug. No one knows. No one has to know. And if you make me look bad, we're going to have a problem. That's when there's a problem. So I didn't push on that. I did learn the system a little bit in my high school, that kind of like, okay, well, if I do this, my mom will take me to go get my nails done and my hair done. And like, I could work the system a little bit, I feel like. But I didn't understand fully that it's okay to ask questions. It's actually good. It's okay to, have doubt and worry and fear that what I'm believing is, what even is this? And that's what kind of, I would have never questioned any of that, to be honest. I would have just, yes, ma'am, no, sir, sorry, I'm sorry. I still have a problem with that. I'll just be sitting and living my life and be like, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I just felt like saying sorry, apparently. Mm-hmm. So that was very what I was used to growing up. And then in college, I met him. And I remember distinctly, and I've said this recently, but I don't know if you remember. We were going on a date or something. I was like, what do you want me to wear? He was like, I don't care. I was like, no, what do you need me? What do you need me? I need you to tell me what to wear, how to look, how my nails should look, how my, and he was like, nope, this is not my job. Like, what do you want? And I think it was one of the first times I had, heard, what do you want? What do you want your hair to look like? Even down to something so silly as that, right? I ended up going super dark brown. Didn't like it, but I tried it, and I had never done that before. But something as small as that, to say, what do you want? Broke everything almost. And so then, going through that, and my parents did not like that very much. That did not go well. I was being ill-influenced by something. I don't know. So independence is hard. And just working through that started everything. And then I was like, okay, well, if we're going to be a thing, his influence on that, I think spiritually did shape a lot of where I'm at now, because I had never gotten out of my Baptist bubble. Like, so much so that it's, if you do this, you're probably not a Christian, right? And so to hear, oh, this person has gone to an Assemblies of God church, right? Like, that was huge. And I was like, okay, wait, I can question this. I can wonder about this doctrine and theology that I could read to you from memory every bit, but I have no feeling about it. Like, I don't care. Like, does that make sense? Just this,
Oh,
like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean,
like,
I
I can recite anything to you.
I responded to y'all's comment. My comment was, hey, from an Archie, you know, just across the state line, you know, grew up charismatic and Southern Baptist, got my degree from the one of the two state Southern Baptist schools, you know, I've got friends in Oklahoma, and the thing that you're talking about, I will say there are kind of like, it sounds like there are strains within the Southern Baptist Convention of independent fundamentalism, which it sounds like you are more closely aligned with. And then maybe you go to like a First Baptist church and not everybody there is fundamentalists, but then you go to like some of the churches, it's like everybody is. And so I don't know exactly the context. Like, I was kind of in this zone where my dad was much more kind of in the fundamentalist strain, but we were also really in the evangelical thing. And my mom wasn't so much fundamentalist. And so it was kind of like, but I know that there are strains, and then of course, there's churches that aren't even, that call themselves Baptists, that aren't Southern Baptists, that are independent fundamentalist Baptists, which is a kind of a whole nother level of that stuff. So, you know, that's kind of the context that I hear. And it's interesting hearing you talk from Oklahoma, because I'll just drop this into there, but, you know, you may or may not be familiar with Jen Hatmaker's recent like stuff, or you know who that is. She was kind of a big deal in evangelical blogger land, and she talks about being from like really strict Southern Baptist churches in Oklahoma. And then she kind of like deconstructed, got divorced, and now she's writing about it or whatever again. So, but it's interesting, because I think what you're kind of painting sounds probably what maybe some of her experience was, I guess. So you get to college, you're kind of, I mean, that's own version of, at least, I don't, what years were you guys in college? How old are you guys?
That's part of the story.
Okay. All right.
So
Well,
I graduated high school in 2005.
okay.
And I graduated college in 2012.
Okay. And
My first semester of college, his last semester of college.
okay, gotcha. Yeah. So, you know, you're kind of, it doesn't necessarily sound like you're deconstructing like your faith, but you're just like, oh, there's a whole bigger picture of maybe the church than I was ever really, and that's okay. That's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, I started there, and then in the last 2 years, close to deconstructed, and that's more recent.
Yeah.
Fun. And
Talk about it.
well, oh gosh, this is fun. So I decided, screw it all.
Nice.
At one point, I was just mad. I'm mad. Like, I felt lied to. I felt like nothing was right. None of it. Like, I had so much faith in this thing that doesn't matter, right? And so I had just decided, you know what? I'm done. I don't care. Like, I think I looked at him and said, hey, the only church you're getting me in is a life church, because nobody cares. Nobody knows me. I can walk in, I can walk out, I can check the box and feel better about myself, but I don't have to do anything. I don't have to
Life
care.
church? Is that what you said? Life church?
Yeah.
Like
Craig the mega church thing.
Craig Rochelle, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't trust anyone. I think the thing I keep saying over and over is, how is the Spirit, if God is consistent and his Spirit is consistent, how is it that I can visit 17 churches within a 1-mile radius of my home, and all 17 are different? and the spirit of the church is telling them something different than the one next to them. And that didn't, and it still confuses me a lot of the time, but it didn't sit well. And I was done. I was like, then I don't trust any of them, because I can't trust which ones are actually communing with God. I never, in deconstruction, that's always like, oh, well, I just don't believe in God anymore. That didn't happen. I don't believe in church anymore is what was happening to me, where there's this God, yes, Jesus, yes, Trinity, yes, those are my basic, and then I'm just done.
What were some of the things? So there's a little bit of like postmodern collapse, like, well, if this church is this, what makes it different? And it's just all, they're all just, there's no, it's just, they're all the same. And then what were there certain things, just, was it the doctrine or the bubble popping? Was that what broke the trust? Or were there other things that you felt like hurt your trust?
I think it was, we had been to I've been First Baptist, whatever First Baptist church is in the, city you're in, that's the one you go to. And growing, so the one I went to in high school, I asked one question in college. I texted the youth pastor and I was like, hey, I heard this thing about Calvinism. What's that? And he said, stay away. Don't ask questions. Don't answer questions. So whoever's talking to you about that, don't even talk to them. Okay, well, that's dramatic. And then I go to another one and they're talking about Calvinism, and they're First Baptist. This town is Calvinist. And it's like, what is happening? And then I go, I don't know how specific I can be.
As specific as you want to.
Matt Chandler,
yeah.
I don't want to.
You already said it.
I don't want to be rude.
Be specific.
Okay, so
It's okay.
I got into the Acts 29 thing, and it was like back in, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And that was like, oh, well, this is like this charismatic Baptist mix of stuff. That sounds better than what I'm used to. And then fast forward to a couple of years ago, or I guess a year ago, when I started getting angry, I look at this Acts 29 network, and there's this idea that is going around about it, that over the past however many years, a pastor can change their mind on fundamental doctrine or fundamental things that the church believed or the group of churches believed, and they can change their mind, and slowly over time they've changed their congregation's mind, not by a willing, hey, this is what's going on, I've changed my value and my belief, but I know I'm right because the Spirit told me so. And now I'm going to convince my entire congregation of this before they know it. And then when the people who realize it 4 or 5 years later aren't happy, I've still got plenty of people with me because I manipulated them over this amount of time.
You mentioned Matt Chandler.
I just find that as an example.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Are you talking like related to kind of critical race theory stuff that they just like,
some of the progressive things
they just like slid right in?
It just slid in, and I hope that's not too offensive, but it did. It felt like 8 years ago I listened to one thing. I didn't listen for about 3 or 4 years, so I had this sort of like I wasn't the frog that boiled for that long a period of time, because I took a break from listening to all of his stuff, and then I started listening again, and I was like, this is not the same as it was when I listened before. When did your mind, and I feel like that broke a lot of trust in me. And then I'm seeing all of these different First Baptist churches I've been to be different theologically than the one, they're just different. And it just depends on the pastor. Whatever the pastor thinks is the theology is what the church believes is the theology. Okay, I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me. I can go to the Assembly of God church in town. Loving people. Amazing community. Wonderful humans. And I read the 16 fundamental beliefs that I'm questioning what's happening there. And so I don't know that I see all of the pastors in that group believing the same thing. So where's the line, and where's the theology, and does it even matter? And I just got mad. It's too complicated. I'm like, why? This can't be what God wanted for us. Is like everybody to just be confused all the time and angry with each other. So, I mean, I don't know how much
that was
more.
and you're saying that was about a year ago when that kind of collapsed a little bit for you?
It was. It was way more recent than I think I like.
Yep.
It again slowly, and then just the breaking point of like, I'm beyond annoyed. And then we walk into Life Church because we decided we're going to try all 17 churches, which is, I'm sure, his part of the story. But we walked into this Life Church, which is the big mega church in our area. And he's talking about the Apostles' Creed. And he's going through a sermon series about the Apostles' Creed. And I was like, we've got history, cool. We've got Protestant, cool. Like, I'm here. This is nice. I like it. And then he had written a book about deconstruction.
He being Craig Rochelle.
Craig Rochelle.
Okay.
And so I read that. I read his book. And it helped in a way of me saying, there's something here to question. Like, and it's okay. In the book, he talks about like, it's okay to have doubts. It's okay to think for yourself, pretty much, because that's their whole thing. That's like what is their slogan? Anything short of sin.
Oh,
like something.
yeah.
Funky.
It's we will do anything short of sin to proclaim the gospel. Share the
yeah. And so that's fine. Like,
go ahead.
Whatever. And so that's before I ran into sacramental theology. That's fun. So that helped because I was like, okay, I'm angry. Like, and I'm going to accept for a little while that I'm angry, and that the only thing I know to be true is that God exists, and that's it.
It's a good starting point.
And so I sat there for a little while.
Yep.
So I have some things I want to say.
Go
Is that
for
okay?
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I attended an Acts 29 conference in 2012 as a worship leader, for our church. I was full-time on staff. Yeah. And, and again, I don't know. It's hard to know what people know coming in if you've watched other episodes or I've talked about such things, but it's like, pastor from big church on the East Coast called Seacoast comes in, talks to all the lead pastors, executive pastors, and all the worship leaders go downstairs and hang out with Charlie Hall. So that was fun. But afterwards, my pastor looked totally dejected because the guy basically said, everyone has a number on how big your ability to grow a church based off of your charisma. It has nothing to do about anything else. But he didn't use charisma, but it was like, you're a 200 guy, are you a 500 guy? Are you a 1,200 guy? Are you a 5,000 guy? And a big part of that whole thing, I mean, I call it church growth startup culture, which is super entrepreneurial. And even like, Craig Rochelle, like he's running the business thing really well. If you want, props to, people want him to come talk to their business leaders because he knows how to run a business really well. So, I mean, there is that. And that's where I kind of sometimes cringe about the whole, like anything short of sin. It's like, we're going to, it's like, the way that the kind of modern megachurch movement engages with culture is, man. I mean, there's like, kind of meme joke versions of it. And then, the movie series or a roller coaster on the stage. And then there's just stuff that's more like, yeah, we engage with culture, like our music sounds culturally relevant or whatever you want to, how you're preaching, whatever. Okay. But the Acts 29 thing, at the guy that was pastor of that church that I went to that conference at killed himself about 7 or 8 years later, after he had some failure. And, it's like, and I know other people that were involved in that the pressures, that there was a young guy in Southern California that killed himself. It's like, are there good things, and have people been impacted positively by Acts 29? I don't want to, of course, the gospel goes where it goes, and all these things, but it's like, yeah, I have major critiques. I have major critiques about what it means to pastor, versus what it means to be like an entrepreneur. And I just, in that whole world, so much of like what it means to be a gifted church planner, all this, the church planning movement is all built off of entrepreneurial principles. And I know you hinted at sacramental theology, and I'd like to dive in there in a second related to such things. But it's like, that there's also language around like what it means to do something well. Like, the thing about being able to walk into Life Church and basically like not have to even think, not have to be confronted with true community, true being knownness. The whole key is that you aren't really known. Like, that's like the thing. And then everything else, the guy who runs the channel Gospel Simplicity talks about, he's used the word, I don't know who else says this, but it's like ecclesial anxiety that comes up. And like, to your point, one of my first conversations I had on here was with Kel Zeldin, who's Catholic. And one of the kind of the early thesis that I brought out to this place is like, the digital has eaten the walls of the church. Like, and you're experiencing that where you are looking and all of a sudden I'm in a space and I'm talking to a Catholic, or I'm talking to an Orthodox or a Presbyterian or a Baptist. And it's like, what do I do with that? And then you're being also confronted with church history for the first time. And even if your old pastor is like scared to even, hey, what's Calvinism? Just stay away. Just stay away. Like, well, that doesn't help me deal with like what that might mean. And I'll also say, on my own personal thing about, all the Baptist churches that are being Calvinists are not being Calvinists. They're not being Calvinists, because Calvin like was sacramental. Calvin was wrapped in the vestiges of the medieval church, and so what his ideas were not devoid from the liturgy and the embodiment that he practiced and participated in. And so if those things, like if you're talking about God's sovereignty, but you don't have like a theology of like covenant to go with that, or you don't have the means of grace, when you marry those things into just like sola fide, and then you have, and it's all just happening, it's like, it just like wipes away agency. And if your church theology is based on like this individual thing versus kind of a covenantal community thing, it just creates a lot of problems, in my opinion. And I'm not a theologian. But that's just, I want to kind of like reference some of that stuff that I've been wrestling with in this journey as well, that you're not alone and that you're in a good place to wrestle with it. And, at this point, critique some of these things that have had time to germinate, to see their logical conclusions. So the last thing I'll say, and we'll kind of come up on your story and then we'll go over to Miles, but like you mentioned the Matt Chandler thing, and even just this experience with the megachurch, the thing you mentioned about theologies changing, and I know it was like you could just look across the landscape, all the guys, the young restless from David Platt, J.D. Greer, all these things. It's like they feel when basically what they were responding to was the massive popular pressure of George Floyd pressing up against conservative, church world, Southern Baptist world, and that all of a sudden they realize that they have the unforgivable sin of being white males. And it's like, at that point, well, you just have to bend the knee to that. And there's nothing, and there was no, and so to the point of like, when they're bringing up ideas related to critical race theory, are they interfacing that, say, with the Baptist faith and message, the stated, belief, or if they want to go back to the 1687 confessions of the Baptist from England? Like, I think those are some of the things that we can look at now and some of the experiences that you're having, that those are the bigger questions of authority. And also, like, what is you're asking questions about polity related to the church structure and the nature of these independent popedoms, like, in a sense that you're seeing play out and all these things. It's a lot, and it is intense, and it does create a lot of questions of trust, because like you said, you're trusting in this person's leadership and you're looking out. And so, is there something beyond the person? Is there a structure beyond the person? Are there confessions beyond the person? Is there a tradition is there anything? Guardrails? Is there anything? And I think that I resonate with what you're saying. So I know that was a lot, but you were speaking my language. And so I just wanted to engage with it. I don't know if there's any things you wanted to say related more to your story before we hop over. So.
Probably not really. I haven't necessarily landed on where that is either. And I think that's frustrating a lot of the time. I think God gave me the wonderful gift of submission, and that's hard sometimes. But I am, like, that is something that, like, and I don't say that lightly, like, I sometimes use as an ability to be passive rather than just submissive. But I do think that I find it a blessing that I do have the ability to be submissive, because we've seen a lot of people in marriages hurt through either something like this or the church hurt or things like that. And it's helped me be able to just trust that, like, he does have this headship in our home that I'm going to follow. Like, no pressure.
Well, the last thing I was just going to poke is, you said you started looking into sacramental theology. Like, when did that happen, and what do you mean by that?
This guy's fault.
All right.
Yeah, so
I can't quite answer that, I don't think.
That's
right.
I'm in it. I'm like learning and exploring and understanding. And at this point, I don't know that I could not have heard it. Does that make sense? Like, glass shattered. So here we are, more confused, but ready to learn way more than I thought existed.
So I think I can actually fill in some of the gaps here.
Back up a little. Let's come back to it, but back up and kind of share some of your story.
Yeah. So, and let me preface with, I think that I hear her being challenged by telling her story independently, because we met when she was very young.
Yeah.
And we've been married for, it'll be 11 years in January. Right. So a lot of our story is very tied together.
Yep.
I was born and raised in Oklahoma by two educators. My parents were both teachers. My dad was a coach. My dad was also an ordained minister in the Southern Baptist Church. Now he never held a full-time preaching position, but held multiple different youth pastor positions, led, it wasn't worship back then, it was mostly hymns, right?
Singing, hymn singing,
led the singing, and did a lot of work with FCA, and a lot of really good work, a lot of really truly what I would call like the Lord's work, like really loving people and pouring out his life for others. My dad was a great man. So I grew up, I used to say I was born in the pew, because we were there every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night. And I never really, it was just part of life for most of my life growing up. About 13, I started to go through some of the normal male challenges with primarily with lust and with independence and rebellion, trying to really forge my own identity. And there's so much to be said about finding manhood and in today's day and age, and the lack of formality in that, and the lack of parental guidance into it. My my parents both being educators were. I actually told the story at lunch today. I went out with a friend from work, and I told him, I said, my parents, they were both educators, but they're two of the worst interpersonal communicators I think I've ever seen. Like these two people, did just refuse to talk to each other, like on a heart to heart, one on one, really get into conversations such as we have in the corner, where we talk about what we think, what we fear, what we feel, um, where we want things to go, our vision, our experiences. I never really heard my parents talk about any of that. And as they aged, and as I aged, and my younger sister, I have one younger sister, as we aged, that really started to wear and become evident that these two people were in this struggle of life, but also not talking through it. And they ended up divorcing the summer before my senior year in high school, which was a huge faith shaker, right? I definitely didn't deconstruct, but my parents had stopped going and participating in church, and my whole life, my dad had been a deacon, a youth pastor, a worship leader, leader of the FCA, and just kind of the stereotypical two children, small house dog, like the stereotypical Midwestern family. And then all of a sudden, and my mom had been the piano player and the person that was there to serve the church in some way every time the door was open. And all of a sudden, these two people were divorcing, and it was really, it really. I think there was some deconstruction. Sorry, our Pomeranian is trying to enter the picture. There was some deconstruction that happened along with it, but I would say for the grace of God, I was given a lot of good friends who were very faithful at a young age as well, like who have now become pastors and youth pastors themselves. So I went through that. Went to college without much direction, even though my parents were both teachers. Like they're not once did they ever talk or assume that I would go. I went on 0 collegiate visits. I was pretty lost as soon as I graduated high school. I had no idea what direction to go. My parents divorced, like I said, the summer before my senior year in high school. So after high school, I was living with my dad, but I didn't really know where to go. And there's a D2 school, a Division II school, small university out in Western Oklahoma that I attended, primarily because it was right in the middle between, it was 45 minutes from mom and 45 minutes from dad. So I was able to really stay in connection and go home and benefit from two different groups of parents in some ways that were willing to feed me and wash clothes, right? But I was also left with like the shambles of this family that had just fallen apart and not having direction, and being sort of a non-traditional student because.
I lost your audio.
Uh-oh.
Oh, that's better. There he is.
I went to
Oh, it's cutting out. Something sounded like it fell or.
There. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
I went to community college in Oklahoma City for two fall semesters because I was so lost that I didn't really know that I wanted to go to that D2 school yet. So I went to these. The summer after, or the fall after I graduated high school, I went to community college, and then basically failed all my classes because I stopped going to school. Then the next fall, I repeated that process, really illustrating like no direction. Was working at a bank, and it was just kind of a mess. And then ended up deciding I wanted to go to that D2 school. And because I was coming in late, I was not a traditional student, right? So things that are in place to sort of catch a traditional student who's interested in the faith. Primarily, I'm speaking of like the BCM, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Baptist Collegiate Ministry, baby.
Yeah, right. Which is great. There's a lot of benefits from it, but the one challenge that the BCM at the school that I went to had was sort of capturing non-traditional students. If you were a traditional freshman, they're really good at like putting you in what they used to call freshman families. Yeah. But if you were a non-traditional student, they really struggled on how to work you into the group. So I made a lot of friends by going to their sort of services that they had weekly. I was friends with a lot of the worship leaders and a lot of the guys who were really plugged in there, but I never was able to plug in. And because I had not only Baptist experience in high school, but also had good friends, like I mentioned earlier, that were Pentecostal, specifically Assemblies of God, I hung out with the Chi Alpha people too.
That's right.
and then during the
Their
week,
worship services went longer. Their worship services went longer on the campus ministry. So
usually darker, a little bit more of a fog machine vibe.
I call it eros. They really deal with the eros of, that kind of like, deep passionate, more passionate stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's funny is like I would also bounce around a little bit because different campus ministries had different lunch for free. So
hey, they all know that. They all know they're playing that game with you. You know that.
Yeah. So I would go over to the Church of Christ Center and have lunch over there too. The only one I didn't really, and I got also had friends that were at members of Cru, Campus Crusade for Christ, as well. The only one I didn't really get into was the Wesleyan Center.
Gotcha.
And that's because they had their lunch was the same time as the Church of Christ lunch.
And it must not have been as good.
That's just bad strategy. Like you gotta make sure that you take that, if you're the fifth faith-based student ministry, make sure that your lunch is at a different time. Yeah. So I bounced around and really was just again lost, but also like having this faith background, I sort of gravitated towards friendships that were built on that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was a resident advisor in the dorms that I lived in, and I was surrounded by people who weren't believers. And I had a lot of friends that were on my floor who weren't believers and who were very different than I was. And there was a lot of like pulling into some of these other belief systems, other worldviews that really started to, I would say that like a lot of people would expect for me to be the really conservative one and for her to be the more liberal one in today's day and age.
Right.
The more progressive liberal one. And honestly, when we met, it was kind of opposite. I was still kind of wrestling with faith, but I was definitely living in a way that was a little bit more open, a little bit more, not so deeply committed in moralism and so that I think that is what actually shook her a little bit. Was she met someone who had really big questions, right? She trusted me for whatever reason, but I had really big questions, and she didn't even know she could question. So there was this kind of collision between someone who didn't know she could question and someone who like was just.
What were some of your questions at that time? Was it like evolution or like what was kind of
Yeah. I remember her getting really weirded out as I started to study evolution and have questions about that. And then also just I was living with a friend who I would say was very progressively liberal, and it was kind of a weird environment. And then I was also like not opposed to doing some of the things that she was taught not to do, right? Like
have a beer.
What is that?
A beer.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So don't drink, cuss, or chew, or date girls that do. But it was kind of reverse for her, right? Don't date boys, men that do. And I was doing all of those things. So, and kind of didn't without regard really for a lot of things, because my dad ended up passing in 2012. He's diagnosed with prostate cancer, and then passed. And alcohol from me at that point was sort of an escape. I was, really into a lot of things that Jordan would tell you to stop doing. Jordan Peterson, don't, sorry, I'm struggling here. Like video games and alcohol and promiscuity, pornography. There's just a lot that was kind of in this. I was sort of stuck in this. The place that I think Jordan Peterson and
extended adolescence extended adolescence, just, not taking responsibility or agency in the world, and just, and then questioning why the world sucks. You know?
Exactly. And with a lean towards being sort of open to conspiratorial things and really anything. Like I was very just an open explorer. And so that's where, like, we met in 2012. We dated for 2.5 years. She actually broke up with me for a short time, and in that time that she broke up with me, because I wouldn't marry her, which was the right thing to do in the time.
Nice.
I really repented and really deep dove into, okay, what is this faith? Like, what is this faith that has always sort of sat on my shoulder, right? Like, I had the devil and God raging inside me, if you're aware of the song reference there. Right. And so I started to commit my life to that. I had actually a Southern Baptist seminary visit scheduled for October of 2014. Late October, I think it was, or November.
Which one? Kansas City?
November.
Kansas City or Southern?
Southern in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Was planning on visiting, and we found out we were going to have
together.
Oh yes, yeah. So we had gotten back together, right? And I had this seminary visit planned, and we found out we were pregnant. So, so I'm saying I was wrestling with this faith thing. I was much deeper into it, much committed into it. But it's easy to fall back into really like the sin that has become a bit habitual. So yeah, with that changed the plans from me becoming a Southern Baptist pastor pretty significantly.
Yeah.
And then to catch you up, so we moved a May wedding to January. We got
shotgun.
Married. Yeah.
Shotgun.
Well, not really.
No.
It's crazy. This is just a cute little, because I can't help myself apparently.
Say it.
We found out on Halloween, and I had in hand the deposit that I was taking to this wonderful rose garden for a May wedding, and it was this whole thing, and his mom had actually fronted the money for it. It was like this thing, right? And we found out the day before they were opening registration, like they had closed registration for to redo contracts and stuff, and November 1st they were opening it back up, and I was like, well, never mind. Well, January it is.
Yeah. So that made the commitment very real for me, because there wasn't any way that I was going to. I had it in me to be the parent, like to be the dad, to take responsibility of that. It was a major blow to my faith, because, to be to where I was considering moving to Kentucky to be on campus for seminary, and then all of a sudden realizing what I considered a moral failure in my life to have this sin in my life and in our lives, and very obviously leading us into that was very challenging. But
could you say more about that?
Yeah.
Because what it sounds like you're saying is like that you had to do more wrestling. So, and I mean, I don't know how much you know my story. I was fired for being unfaithful in my marriage. And so as a worship pastor at non-denom, but you know how that all basically Baptist church in so many capacities, but it's like, so you talk about, because what I hear in a sense, like, even though I'm just going to say this and then I want to hear, but like, well, actually, no, you go ahead.
So wrestling with that, I was in a place where I was very serious about my faith and very committed, but there was some family drama that had moved her to, she got kicked out of her house. Like, her parents kicked her out, and while we were dating, and it was because we were dating, which is odd, because like, I think that's maybe the worst move that you could make as a parent, is like, yeah, we're going to throw you out. Like, where else would she have gone? She came to live with me.
Well,
right?
we weren't even together at that point. They just still didn't like that we had been together. And I was done, right?
Mm.
And I ended up living in this house with 3 random girls that I didn't know. Like super cheap, trying to go to college and have a part-time job and pay for all. I mean, I fell flat on my face and was like scraping myself off the floor. And it's like, we get back together, of course.
Yeah, and I was pursuing her pretty hard because I knew that after she broke up with me, I knew like, okay, yeah, I want to marry her, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get to put myself in a place where that could happen. Like
because she is good. She is good.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that, repentance, renewal of what I felt like was my faith relationship with the Lord, and very what I would call like very I would probably call it now like very Protestant minded repentance. And
do better, be better.
Yeah. But there was like a very spiritual renewal of mind and conscience and heart. So like when the test came back positive that we were having a baby, it was a punch spiritually. Because I had in my vision like, okay, maybe we get married, we move to Kentucky, pursue becoming ordained, probably a master's of divinity, and it just all crashed down at the same time. So you want like going deeper into that. That was probably the first time I would say that like after my dad passed, I was very empty emotionally, and Rebecca and I met. We met in September. My dad died in October. Her great grandfather, passed in November. There was a lot of trauma at the beginning, and I think it really knitted us together. And I think it was it was spiritual guidance that we needed each other in the time. So she had stood by me and was really patient in my grieving because I was very angry. Like I was really, because my dad, like I said earlier, my dad was a really good man. And so when he passed and he passed at 54, I was pretty angry about it and just really emotionally numb. And so as I started to come out of this and heal, and Rebecca had been with me the whole time. And then we date, she breaks up with me, we get back together, we find out we're pregnant. And there was this like, my faith at that point was mine. It was not connected to my parents in any way. Yeah. And I had this really like what I felt like I had made choices that separated me, that somehow influenced my ability to be effective within ministry. And maybe that resonates from what you've said, but like that was really hard because it was something that I was really trying to achieve.
Yep.
That all of a sudden wasn't an option anymore. So yeah, we'll pause for a second.
It's all right.
I don't know if you edit any of it, but
yeah, I can do some little clips and stuff. But
sorry, our kiddo is going to sleep.
Wrestling with that was just like, is there forgiveness available?
Yep.
Right. Like what sort of my sackcloth and ashes moment.
Yeah. And that's totally then a choice of responsibility of what will I do with this? Mm-hmm. And where will I go? Where will we go from here?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I feel like that sort of is what our marriage turned into, was this question of where do we go from here? Like, who are we? Being raised with this very similar background, sort of, not intending to make any sort of statement with a marriage, It's a very different time today, I think, than where it was when we got when we started, right? That's 13 years ago. A lot has changed in the world of well, and just in the world. And so there wasn't any intended statement by being married. It was just two people who just really cared about each other, that wanted to spend their lives together. Like, it was very genuine in that. Um, but there was this sudden, I had told her early on when we very first started dating that I felt some sort of call to ministry, and I felt like there was a betrayal of that,
Mm.
and maybe that I was disqualified. Um, there's probably a whole different podcast or episode that we could we could unpack on qualifications for ministry. And I have a very different perspective of all of that now. But there was this that's really the direction that our marriage started. That's the first step of our marriage, was finding out we were pregnant, moving the marriage date, getting married, and then really wondering and fighting through, who are we? Where do we go from here? So
So
we started
you were
bouncing
shaping it.
around in different faith traditions and
Yeah.
churches. Go ahead.
I was just saying you were shaping an identity, of a calling, and maybe that likely was a true calling, and that betrayal of that calling, is, I just think about Abraham's life, like being called out and then like lying, and like not trusting God, and then God works again with a covenant. It's like to bounce back on that. What is that? Look, what is qualifications, those kinds of things. But so now you're married, this, pushing 15 years ago, and y'all begin to build this life, and now you're looking at other churches. And so this is kind of that, moving into this ecclesial, who are we? What are we? What is church? Like,
And I've always been inclined to study, and grew up Southern Baptist. So of course that's where I started. I started with a lot of presupposition that, oh yeah, I am Baptist, or I am, Protestant. And I thought for a while that, like, the answer was expositional preaching, right? It needs to be line by line, word for word, understanding of scripture, very sola scriptura, understanding of that. And that's what I was really pursuing, and leading into some of these Baptist churches. And it just was it was kind of that BCM thing. It was just like, I never fit. Like, I always felt like I was on the outside of these churches looking in. Like, for whatever reason, whether it be the premarital conception, or
parents are divorced.
parents
Like
are
they
divorced.
did do ministry and then not. Yeah.
Yeah, it was always like, we wanted to be deeper in, we wanted to be core group, but we were always on the peripheral. And we bounced around a little bit from church to church. Of course, we moved a couple of times. I had taken different jobs, and they led us into different parts of basically all around Oklahoma City. And where it eventually landed us, like, we went through the Acts 29 network stuff that she mentioned. We were attending an extremely local First Baptist church here where we live. And are you familiar with I think his name's Matt Whitman, the 10-minute Bible hour?
That title, but not the whole thing. Yeah.
So he goes around and visits different churches, right? And he, of all faith traditions, within Christianity, and he went into an Eastern Orthodox church and connected with Father Paul Truenbach from Utah, from Salt Lake City. And the way that Father Paul was talking about scripture, about the orthodoxy, and the way that he presented things, it just caught me. Like, I was very intrigued by something I had no familiarity with it. And so I started to look into Eastern Orthodoxy, and then I ended up found Peterson. I was very late to Peterson, very late. Actually, it would have been beneficial, I think, for me to have found him earlier, but I found him very late, and then through Peterson found Peugeot, and then things started to, like, really make sense in a certain way. And I started to ask questions at the Baptist church that we were going to. We were, going every Sunday morning. We were going to Sunday school. We were building friendships. And in our Sunday school class, we were talking about the book of Genesis. And so
Let's go.
I started to ask questions about original sin and state and in this specific church that we were going to, everybody there was Calvinist. And I was like, maybe I'm not a Calvinist. And so I'm dropping hints and here and there to see how this group reacts. And I wouldn't say they like made it known that we were unwelcome, but it became more uncomfortable with the questions that we're asking, that I was asking. And so
I have a
we
question
had a
on that.
conversation in the hallway. Go ahead.
Oh, well, no, keep going.
We had a conversation. I had a conversation with someone who we had started to build a relationship with in the hallway, as we were picking up the kids from the nursery. And after that conversation, we left, and I said, "Yeah, we're not coming back."
So, I mean, you don't have to share the details of it, but and that sounds kind of painful. But the thing that I'm wondering about that, because how much of that is actually appropriate to like try to like if you're going to be faithful to what you say your church believes, versus like, hey, I have these questions about say Orthodox theology. And it's like, I think if they think that you're going to try to change the whole church, if they're going to respond from that kind of fear, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But if there's some line of like, dude, go explore that. This probably we're not going to answer your questions here, but we love you. There's two ways to respond to that. I don't know. Sounds like it wasn't that second way.
Definitely wasn't the second one. It wasn't really the first one. This is a very large church.
Yeah.
Okay. There was no chance that I was going to somehow.
Right. Okay. There's good context there. Yeah.
But I have also wrestled with like, I'm sure I'm not blameless. I'm sort of an antagonistic by
confrontational to a degree.
I'm not afraid of communication in ways that my parents were. I leaned into being very opposite of them, within this confrontational. We'll call things out, like let's hash it out now. I'm if I'm demanding in anything, it's probably that. Like if you have a problem, say what your problem is so we can work it out. But with good intentions, like I want to resolve things. I probably have a fear of things being unresolved and then turning into divorce, right? In some way, whether it be marriage or friendship, or I like to make sure that like if there's something going on, like we really call it out. So I am I would say I'm naturally antagonistic in conversation to test the conversation, to test the ethos of the group, to test many other things. And so I'm not blameless in that pursuit, but there was definitely not an openness to discussion, which is really
what you were hungry for.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were hungry for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had our children were participating in programs there. We were members of the church. And I said, yeah, we're not coming back. And she looked at me and she said, okay, so where are we going to go to church? And that was what really opened up the ecclesiastical anxiety. Right? Because now it was like on me, I felt like, to steer the ship, to be the head of the house, to direct us into what's next. And I'm still doing that. Like I'm still trying to work through that. We've had so many conversations, but it has led us deeper into where we are now. That's literally like why we are here. Like it's what led me into PVK, which eventually brought her with me. I have gospel simplicity merch. Like I've watched
the maps guy.
hours
awesome.
and hours and hours of content of Lutheran pastors and Anglican pastors and Orthodox pastors and Paul and basically everything but Baptist.
You
trying to identify like
you lived that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So
hopefully that like marrying those two, right? Hopefully that kind of fills in the gaps for where she's coming from, because she's been along, like, I don't want to say along for the ride. In my opinion, we do everything together. We walk together. I'm definitely not like, she used the word submission, and I'm like, whoa, somebody out there is going to think like,
Maybe,
oh, he's forcing her to. No, that's
they
not.
are going to think that.
Keep in mind that I'm the more like open liberal one here. So, like,
only say that if you really believe it.
yes, yeah.
He's always like, don't say that too loud.
You know, it's so funny because, like, I mean, I've met people that like are, you know, very, the talk is like all the progressive talking points, but like their marriage looks very like, hey, do what I say, you know, like it's funny, and it's not funny, but it's, you know, it's like, okay, yeah. And that goes into this whole other thing that we're even dancing around about, like sets of belief versus practice, you know, and what is faith? And I think that, you know, so, I mean, I meet you there. I've been in a similar journey. You hit on like the sacramental thing, but I guess, like, you know, before, let's go ahead and like talk about getting to the conference and what, like, why you felt like y'all needed to come, and just more about your, as you've had more time to process since making that video, maybe like that, talk a little bit about that experience of going to Midwestuary, and just kind of that, this journey, like bringing us right up to this point, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Me first. So I think getting us there, we had kind of gone through a lot of this before Christmas last year. And so for his birthday, we decided to sign up for Midwestuary. I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah, we were sitting in the living room. We were sitting in our living room watching Paul on a very large television, and Midwestuary branding popped up.
Yeah.
And she goes, "We should go to that." And I said, "Really?"
Wow.
It's candy. Yeah.
I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Let's go."
Why not?
I've never been to Chicago.
That's what I was in it for. I was like, I've never been to Chicago. I would love to go. We didn't do anything for our 10-year anniversary. I mean, and we were on the heels of our 10-year anniversary. It was in January, and yeah, I was like, we're not doing anything. Let's go to Chicago because I've never seen it. And he was like, now, let's just go ahead and buy the tickets now. So we literally bought them that day.
Yeah, we during that conversation purchased tickets to Midwestuary. Yeah. It was like, snap, like, yes, we're going, because I just I had always wanted to participate. This word play has come out. I can't even remember whose video it was. I think it was maybe you and Neil that were talking about this idea of play, or maybe it was Henry, of like the concept of like playing in conversation. And in my participation in like small groups and groups of friends, like that's something that I just love, right? I love this conversation craft. Plug. I love the banter. I love the exploration. I love the mingling of souls and the entwining of minds to pursue something via conversation, and seeing the Friday estuaries and watching. At that time, I had really only seen like Grail Country and a lot of Luke's videos. But what caught my attention was that conversation piece. And there were specific individuals that I was like really, really looking forward to meeting and really wanted to meet. And so when she suggested, let's go, it was like, absolutely, we're going. And we're always down for a road trip. Like we love
road trip,
jumping in the car and hitting up the Buc-ee's or the big, and then we try to we try to pull off and like we stop at like the destination places that are not too terribly far off the highways and make it like a real trip. We love like boutiques and main streets and stuff like that. So it was an opportunity to explore the Midwest. And I've never, I guess I may have mentioned already, I had never been to Chicago. So it was easily on my bucket list to see a Great Lake. Like, just really wanted that experience. So there was a lot that was just available, and we were blessed financially to be able to just commit to it immediately.
And you come back and you like pop on the internet. It obviously inspired you. You talk about like this idea of play. I really got that from Chad. Chad on Friday Morning Nameless. Like, that was his encouragement. And coming from myself, like kind of like big Eva styled church and ministry and production and all this kind of stuff, like I actually had to strip away a lot of that to get myself to play. I heard you guys in the in y'all's video say we're gonna get better equipment, or we're gonna get like yeah, it's easy for me to say that with mics and these are Home Depot shop lights, but it's like, but the thing that I'm trying to say is like I bought this, I built this thing out because I was thinking about doing music and stuff, and it's like with music production, it's like, okay, everything has got to be perfect and I gotta sound good and I gotta, it's like all this energy. And if you're gonna try to do like what the corner taught me, Paul would say things like, don't edit, like, Grimm's just like gritty picture, or like, Nate's running a channel, and, or Sam's channel. It's just like, they're just turning on the camera. And I was like, okay, like, that looked a little different from me. Even me just turning on a camera was like 4K. And it was like, no, it wasn't the same, but I'm like, I know I'm playing, like I want to play. Yeah. And it took that mindset shift for me to even like pretend I was having a podcast. Was like, if I would have like really tried, I would have burnt out long time ago. So my encouragement, if you're still thinking about working on doing this stuff, is don't worry about your polish and don't worry about like perfection. And like, if you have something in you, there's people that are, it'll find the people if it's meant to be in that thing. So anyways, that's just my encouragement on that point.
We've talked a lot about what the next step is. I think we were maybe too quick out of the gate with making the video in some ways, because I don't know that I had a real solid understanding of what the TLC was. Like, I understood the estuary form, the protocol. I understood Paul's videos, but as we came home, we made the video. I sent it to Neil. Neil Daedalus and I had connected at Midwestuary. And like, he was on my list of people that I wanted to meet.
You were doing the Neil thing. Like,
he tells the story about Chad, right? That he knew he wanted to meet Chad.
Yep.
I told him that, like, that was my story for him.
Awesome.
I remember him being way up in the Northeast, I think it was, with Paul and with several others in a barn. And I was like, I want to meet that guy. I have to meet Neil. And we had a crazy experience where we ended up meeting pretty much everyone at the same time. We met Neil, we met Paul, we met Elizabeth Oldfield, we met Kale, we met John Heers, we met everyone minus Sam Tiedemann. Tiedemann?
Yeah, Tiedemann. Yeah, Tiedemann.
We met Sam. The only one that we didn't meet at that time was Peugeot and Vervaeke. But we met everybody at the same time. It was just like this, and there was this, coming back, they kind of talked about it with us in mind. I think this celebrity thing that was going on at Midwestuary, a lot of that, I think, had to do with, well, I don't want to claim like credit for it. I was in that group that was a little bit starstruck because I'd been watching these people for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're like here, right? But there was an opportunity to do that and build a relationship with Neil, and connected with Neil throughout Midwestuary. And then came home, did the video, really not knowing what the future for that was, but we just wanted to jump on and say something. And then I actually mentioned to him, I was like, well, we probably should have done a rando first, because we've never even done that. And I said, actually, I'd like to do it with Christian. So that's where that's where this was sort of like idea came from. And now, being 6 weeks from Midwestuary, I mean, it's been a while. It's been a little bit of time, and a lot has happened since then. And I've spent even more time. She's probably uncomfortable with how much time I've spent, like really studying the TLC, like really deep diving into the TLC to have a better understanding. Doing that video now would look completely different than it did then.
That's okay.
So,
and that makes sense. And it doesn't, so what have you seen?
Well, the points that you're making about it being unpolished, it being just jumping in, just turning the camera on and recording it, sort of unfiltered dialogos. And I think when we initially made that, she had a list of all these things that we wanted to talk about. And we sort of felt like we had something to say to someone. And maybe we do. I'm not saying we don't. But I think that there was, in taking a step back and really evaluating the corner, there was a lot of humility that came from it. And like, okay, especially for me, like we don't really, there's forces that exist here and there's spirits at play. And we're not going to come in and like be experts or be, or missionaries or have a message right away. And even in participation, like thinking through, okay, if we have a YouTube channel, there's some celebrity that's going to come with that. Like if we're producing something regularly that gains a viewership, if we show up at a Midwestuary again, people are going to know who we are. Do we even want that? Right? Is that what we're in this for? If not, can we have the same conversations that we would record at home in private and remain corner participators, but maybe not corner producers? So we've kind of wrestled with all of that. And I'm not entirely sure. She has opinions on it, and I'm still observing. And I observe for a long time before I commit to anything. So,
well, it makes sense to have the church camp high response, man. Like it makes total sense. Like, come on. It's like, hey, like I think that's great. Like there was, there's so much goodness and excitement, and it's like, it was an adventure. Like, and it was people can use all sorts of terms, but like I think of these things kind of like pilgrimages, you know, and it's weird where we find ourselves in the digital world related to the physical world and these things. And I think that, looking at the corner, and you're right. I've told this story before, but I was just like, I'm a performer. Like leading worship and being creative or whatever, and being in front of people was just like, that was my 10 years old till 31. That was like what I did, and then there was like 7-year break where I didn't do anything. And, but that part of me had to like heal. There had to be where that was appropriate, I guess you could say. And, so when this made sense and there was like, it's like, oh, and so I'm just like, okay, they're doing that. I'm going to try that. They're doing this. Oh, I'm going to try that. And Chad calls it show and tell. And then Paul will say, I'm stealing that. And it's like, you can be like, hey, that was mine. Oh, isn't that flattery the most, and whatever, I can't remember what the quote is about flattery. What it's like, but, or copying is the most like, but whatever it is. And
imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yeah. So, and like, but there's this, like, you're talking about the spirits, man, like they grip your heart, they grip your soul related to coming into a space that is about performance. There's a performance element when you turn on the camera, and you're lying to yourself if there's not, like you have to accept that as part of the reality. And the challenge is like, how far can I push to be myself, to be true? This, my moniker, yours truly, is like, was part of that, because being on stage, just like y'all talked about, kind of you know, the whole mega church thing and the worship and like the style and all that stuff. You know, and like even to your story about signing up for seminary and yet you're struggling with this thing that you know is not appropriate for that, you know, calling. And I mean, like that is so true. And yet, but just like, you know, Rebecca talking about growing up, well, like that's the whole thing. As long as you look okay on the outside, that's what matters. And so you feel that spirit in this place too, related to image and related to what you think you want people to see or to know about you. And it was very important to me that I didn't come trying to do anything remotely that looked like ministry and not talk about my own failures and my own self-sabotage, and that I wear the scars of betrayal, like that you were talking about, both having been betrayed, but also having betrayed people's trust, church's trust in my marriage and families. And so, and there's this other thing. I mean, just some of the like my third conversation was with old Jordan Hall, and he had status, and dude, he said in this video he released, I know this, but it's like he basically created the company that all streaming runs off of, and you know, and that's like it's just mind blowing. Like, and so as soon as I made this video because he's had this conversion, I was, oh, makes sense. He's from the small town. I'm from a small town. I get some of these things he's talking about. And then he comments on it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought I was playing. I thought he was never going to see this. I'm just playing on the internet. Like that's not supposed to happen. Like, and then I was like, do you want to talk? And he said, yes. And as soon as he said yes, my heart just was like gripped with, what if he says no? Oh man, what's this mean? And who's going to see this? And what are people going to think? And on and on and on, you know, like related to coming into this space or having done things similar to performing in front of people, if we could put it on that level, in ministry. And to the point about those spirits, I don't know if that's exactly what you're talking about. Then it's like, you know, exciting, numbers go up, you know, we call it, you know, dopamine hits or whatever that is. But it's probably a spiritual thing, but it's also a physical thing, and it's a real thing, and it's a soul thing, and it's all the things. And it's like all that stuff is true, and it is at play. And taking it seriously, like you're saying, I think is the right thing. And recognizing that is like the first step, just even naming it like you did. And but there's nothing wrong with being excited and like wanting to participate, you know, like that. I think
we also have this, like, we've got kids, so a sense of protection of them as well. I'm not usually comfortable being seen at all. Like I put together a football basket for our football boys. They're 10. And it's like at a cookout, someone says, good job, Rebecca. And I'm like hiding behind a pole.
Oh,
and so there's this, like, how do we protect? I have a fear of, and just pick one. I'll be afraid of it. And so this, like, how do I protect my kids if I say something stupid on the internet or offensive, because the way that we live is countercultural and offensive? How do we protect them? And how does that impact what we're doing? And is who might be interested in what we're talking about, if it's not a ministry, we're not out to just let's go help somebody, right? Like it's just playing, it's having a conversation. Does that impact my children later? We homeschool, we don't allow our kids on the internet. Like they're not gonna have phones until they think that their eyes are bleeding. Like, you know, like this idea of like protecting them, but also being involved, because I have a desire to be productive.
Yeah.
I am like, I want to help. I want to find, I want to talk, and talking to tiny humans all day isn't the same as going, you know, for 3 days straight at Midwestuary, having deep conversations and meaningful conversations that like I got a high off of, for sure. And then realizing, coming home, doing the video, realizing 3 or 4 days later, we're having deep conversations still, playing a game of Pokemon. You know, like sitting across the table from me. Sorry, we're nerds.
Don't apologize for that.
Don't apologize.
Sitting across the table from each other, having these deep conversations, and it's like, this is good. Like, this is stuff that I want to hold on to for us too. And so we just, I don't know. We're kind of in a have a lot to say, but don't want to put our children or our family in a compromised position at the same time. I don't know. So
I think where I've landed on it is what I benefit from the most within this corner is sharing. Is that's what, to me, that's what the estuary protocol is about. You come, sit around a table, not proverbially, metaphorically, right? Like
symbolically.
You share, you bring your dish, you bring your idea to this group to share, to consume. And then you go around the circle and everyone brings one. It's very potluck conversation, right? And then you identify who brought the best potluck dish, and that's the one that we all want to eat. That's the one that we all want to share, and we talk about it. And then it turns out that they sort of incorporate all of the other ones within this one, and there's this unity, this cohesion, this tearing down of walls. And Elizabeth Oldfield at Midwestuary talked about homophily, right? There's this encouragement to see other. And maybe that's kind of what I'm talking about with the spirits, right? Is there's, the spirit of your channel is different than the spirit of Luke's channel, is different from the spirit of Grail Country, is different from what Neil's got going on, what Henry has going, what Paul has going, what others have going on, what Grimm has going on, McMo, like everyone's different. Everyone's got a different spirit to what they're doing, and there's spirits at play. But we're all sharing those at the same time. So I think that there is something there for us to share, but I think that maybe we had in mind to position ourselves as the married couple of the corner. And in some ways we are, right? In some ways, I think that we're one of the few couples who's ever come out of the lurk together, and that has a certain uniqueness to it. But we need to continue to present it in this mode of sharing so that we can continue to participate. And I'm going to continue to participate. I have participated. We'll continue to. We've connected with quite a few others, and quite a few others who have channels. And I mean, this is our first rando, so we'll probably start doing more on video stuff together. But I think we tear down that missional mentality and really just say, hey, we're just here. We want to hang out. We want to talk. We want to share. And we're going to bring that dish.
Tear down that missional mentality. Oh man. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, what does it mean to bring yourself, or what does it mean to try to save the world? Mm-hmm. Like, I think, like you're saying, offering yourself as a gift versus telling everybody else what's good or something. I don't know, know?
No, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in some ways they are the same thing. Giving yourself in some ways is saving the world.
Yeah.
Because if we do that, if we all do that together, and we live in true communion, and we live in true community, because we have given ourselves to each other in vulnerability and discussion. And I think there is something there for that to happen with our channel. We'll see what it looks like.
That's so fascinating, because there is kind of this impulse, like that you're talking about, the mission, evangelicalism, in a sense. Like, I mean, it's so funny because, like, looking at your channel and kind of knowing your stories, and in a certain sense, it's like, man, am I just turning into Christian YouTube over here? Because really, like, that's not really my aim, is like, but my title is not like, it's just think out loud, but there is like a seriousness related to some of the things to think out loud about that, related to, like y'all mentioned, the sacramental theology. And just being in my embodied life, connected back into helping do ministry at a church. So and that wasn't happening when I started channel. So, it's like, well, and so some of it's my own explorations. It's not like, oh, I'm coming here to do this like on a mission necessarily, but there's like within just trying to explore yourself, you kind of aim at things. So
Yeah.
that's really fascinating, the way that you framed that, about like feeling like, yeah, that there was just something about it that made so much sense. And uh coming from that kind of Baptist background, and man, I just off the cuff, like, it's funny, BCM, I helped lead worship at a BCM at our community college when I was like 16. I wasn't even in college, and they're like, only guy doing the worship music in our town. I was like, hey, can you come to us for worship? Like, been involved. When you go to a Baptist college, they don't call it BCM. They just called it college ministry.
Sure.
There's no BCM. It's just, this is campus ministry, and that's it. It's the throwback there. So, like, I mean, I'm interested then on some of the other, like you're saying, I guess where you guys are at currently now with church, kind of like, that's kind of interesting. Doesn't sound like you're totally settled. Doesn't sound, and we talked about, sacramental theology earlier. So, like, I mean, kind of what's going on there?
Yeah.
Like, where are you guys at right now with that?
I think that it's understanding how. Let me back up. When we were at Midwestuary, I met a couple of the Episcopal priests that were there. I don't know if you had a chance to
No.
meet with them at all. Father Paul and Father Tommy. And I got we had lunch with them during one of the lunch breaks, and Tommy and I just kind of connected in conversation. Right? There's some people that you just sort of instantly bond with. Like, there's just, I don't know what it is. It's a spiritual thing almost, where you bond with them, and I felt like I could just be more vulnerable with him than I typically would with anyone. And I shared with him, like, I have some grief in me for multiple different things concerning the church, concerning the way of Protestantism, concerning the lack of unity, because like, that's one of the last things that Christ said on earth was, his prayer for the church to be unified. Before resurrection. And there's grief in me that, like, I have to wrestle with this ecclesiastical thing. And that grief is from a deep appreciation from where I came from, for the people that came before me, because my dad wasn't the only one that was ordained in my family, and he wasn't the only ordained Southern Baptist in my family. I have an uncle who was like a Southern Baptist pastor for like 60 years. I have one of his sons is currently, to my knowledge, is still a minister. Her grandfather was. I have deep, fond attachment memories to singing Baptist hymns with my mother's mother, like my grandma, and to put all of that down and go through a conversion to something like Orthodoxy or Catholicism. It's hard. There's some deep challenge there, because to me, in some ways, it feels like saying that didn't count, or that it didn't mean what I thought it meant, but I think that, the thing that this whole corner kind of continually circles around is who is saved, like who's a member of this eternal church, like who's a member of this body, and what does that look like, and how does one attain that status? And so I think that for me, I've been really slow to convert to any of the things that I would strongly consider, because I'm in a place where if it's not sacramental participation, then I'm probably not going to consider it. If it looks like it's going to change, I'm also probably not going to deeply consider it. Like if it looks like it could be caught up in the zeitgeist, it's not a church that I want to be. I want to be a part of the church that lives on, that holds as closely to the values as it can to
historical Christianity.
What
is the zeitgeist?
The spirit of the age?
Yeah, what is that?
Self.
And what does that manifest in the church?
Wow, that's a question. I think we see
it's a leading question.
It is a leading question.
Just to be
Jeez, Christian. No. You want to answer that?
No, I want you to give the thing that's in your mind.
It leads to elevation of performance primarily in what I like to call the sacrament of sermon, which to my knowledge is not biblical, and oftentimes into this what I would consider emotionalism participation in worship without presentation of sacrament, like true sacrament in a service. And I think that right now, and I think I'm gonna stake like long term on this. I don't believe that's the intention of the faith. Now that's coming from that place and having had really good memories there and really fond memories of there, that I don't want to say that in accusation without saying like I'm deeply grieving this, right? Like I've participated in a lot of charismatic type worship services, and we used to have these things called burn. It was like they were called burns, and it was just literally just worship music for 24 hours, and we'd have different people who wanted to lead worship for 24 hours, and we would open a church and we would go and we would just participate, and it was like a charismatic participation, right, with speaking in tongues and in various other ways that charismatic belief presents itself. And on the other side of that, I think that my focus was primarily me. And if I'm going to accuse anyone in that, it would be myself. Like my participation was me wanting something for me out of this situation. And I don't think that's definitely not where I am now. And what I've learned from the experiences, a lot of the experiences that we've shared, but deeply through parenting and being married and understanding that the greatest love is laying down your life for others, right? And understanding and coming to that understanding was revelatory in what the participation in a church should look like. But again, the conversion process to something that is not is away from what you've known into the unknown takes time, and I think should be approached with sincerity, but also caution. And I think our heart is there towards some type of conversion into one of the historical
sacramental participation.
But it's taken definitely longer than she would have liked, longer than I would have liked to. But that's the direction we're headed.
I think that also going from taking communion once a quarter at night service, so we don't have to give as many out, like going from that being communion, that's just, oh yeah, like if you want to go be like the extra Baptist, we'll go, fine, to believing that there's something
real
happening,
and calling it a Eucharist,
instead of communion, and this idea of like maybe no one understands what's happening, but we can at least get to a place where it's something important and needs to be treated as such, and so in the last year, less than, I guess, going from it meaning nothing or close to, it felt like, to meaning something very real has been difficult. I know for me it's been difficult. I'm not going to speak for you, but I also am way faster to jump. You're grieving, right? He's talked about the grief and how that's affecting him. I am much more bitter, I feel like, which is not a positive thing. I'm not saying that in a good way. So yes, let's leave it. I am good to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's always, he teases that like it may take longer than I want, but that's because I was very angry, and that is a stage of grief, I feel like.
Yeah.
But going through this, like, I just really want to land. And I think that's a very feminine desire, of have a place for me to land, to figure out. I homeschool, right? So what theology am I teaching my children? What do I believe? What does it, and I, again, gift of submission. I like the idea of the church being something that you submit your thought to because of the historical fathers and what they've cumulatively over a long period of time believed. Because I don't think in 2025 we're just going to read the Bible and think, oh, no one's ever thought that before, we got it now. Like, that doesn't make a bunch of sense to me. So that's kind of, I think, where I've landed in that.
And I think as we've aged as parents and our children have aged, that we look at something like legacy and handing down the faith and passing down our faith, and where did our parents do that well? Mostly they didn't. And how do we do that better? And what are we giving them? And where a lot of churches feel like a lot of churches around our area have been, I don't want to insult them. I think that they've done their best. I truly mean that. But there's a collapse of Christianity in the country. And a lot of it is it's going to look probably worse over the next 15 years unless there's a revival, because a lot of the churches around us are so aged, and there's such a dramatic age gap that the churches won't be alive. Like, literally, these churches are going to die. And how do we give dead church? We can't give a dead church to our children.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're, I think, gravitating towards the historical faith traditions because they're historical. They've been around for, essentially like 2,000 years in some form or fashion. Maybe their beliefs and practices have changed, and that's a different conversation to have about which one, and being more specific about which one we're talking about. But looking at what are we giving our children? What am I bringing my children into? And what are we bringing our children into? And what are we, when it's my time, which is inevitable, what will they have from what they experienced?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, what is to hand my kids the faith of, say, we'll just use Life Church since it's local context, it's big, and we've already mentioned it, but it's like, all right, church is a few rock songs and a really handsome, charismatic, and they're good at their craft of what they're doing. It's like, that's not what I'm, but it's like, what is the Christian faith, and what is that? And I think there's several things related to why did your parents not feel the urgency or the need to pass down some, even though they were giving you identity by going to church 3 times a week, there's a reality there that you're talking about, the pain related to that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also culturally this sense of like, they didn't even tell you where to go. Like, go be whoever you want to be.
Yeah.
That's kind of the ethos that we were handed, which is like, what is your dreams, and just be who you want to be. And instead of giving them an identity, and even though it's like, so the world gives you an idea, the world says, pick your identity, it can be any color of the rainbow, just pick it, it's yours, go. But if you tell them to be Anglican, how dare you tell them to be Anglican? If you tell them to be Presbyterian, how dare you? Even if you tell them to be Baptist, but what does that mean? I think is kind of the question that you're also pointing at, because the whole Matthew Barrett thing that just broke through on, I don't know if you were following that story very much. And I'm going to send you guys some stuff related to my own work throughs on ecclesiastical anxiety, but it's like, at some point you do have to land it. But then the question, at least what I'm dealing with in my context, is like, how, can I give them an identity? And it's like, well, if I'm telling them to be Presbyterian, then I'm limiting all their options. They're always still there. But the thing is like, you can give them something distinct that's recognizable, that rises to the surface amongst the spirit of the age, which is like, I can't see a lot of difference between this and something else. Like, what is it that gives this identity? What is it that gives this form and shape and distinctness or saltiness, and where does that story come from? What is the story of the Church of England? What is the story of the Presbyterian Church? What is the story of the Baptist Church? Like, it's like all of that's disconnected in so many ways. And if you can't see it in, say, the vestments or in, an altar, and some very simple things, even a Bible, for goodness sake, like, you walk into a building that's a performing arts center that, like, there's some cool graphics, but at the end of the day, there's nothing Christian here.
Right.
It's an airport, it's like, and so, and I don't say, and I mean, I've been thinking so much about this related to watching Charlie Kirk's memorial service. Like, one of the things that is really interesting, and I'll just use you guys as a place to process this out loud since I have you here and we're on the topic, but it's like, hopefully you don't feel bad me saying use you guys. I don't like that statement very well.
Hey, we're here. You're bringing the potluck.
Okay.
Right. You're bringing your dish.
Here's my dish in estuary. I think about, there was so much, at least from the conservative circles I follow on Twitter, there's so much like exuberance related to, and I heard this from Catholics. I heard this from a lot, like not just evangelicals. Like, I heard there was this sense of like, wow, like the gospel, and we came around Christ. And I agreed actually with that. But the thing is that what happened with this whole movement, and I started thinking about this my junior year of high school back in like 2001. I wrote my advanced U.S. history class said, write a history paper about anything related to history in the United States. And I chose Christian music because I was a good evangelical boy trying to be a worship leader in 2001. And I also wanted, to like kind of show people like, I'm a Christian. And so, the Jesus movement, the hippie movement, Billy Graham, Michael W. Smith, Amy Grant, Petra, into DC Talk, into,
Reliant K.
Third Day. And then all of a sudden the rock and roll, like, just completely merged. It was like, if you look at Third Day's Offering albums, like that was like with Passion happening at the same time. There was like an inflection that took place, and that was all built off of like U2 and campfire music. And then it's like, well, here's the rock show. And then there was like the amphitheater thing that U2 was doing. Hillsong hit it. You have Chris Tomlin and you have like Hillsong, and it's like these things. And what does it mean that Chris Tomlin was the last person to speak before the dignitary started? Like, last person, like, what does that visually mean? And the fact on the ground is that his music is played more until probably 2015, his music was played more across the world than any artist in the whole world. Chris Tomlin.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand that that's actually massive culturally. You know, and he gets up there and sings How Great Is Our God, and probably 80 to 90% of the 70,000 people that were in that room actually already knew that song. That's a big deal. What does that mean? Here, I'll tell you what I think it means.
Please do.
I think it means that there is actually a place for that, but that the problem happened was that Billy Graham in the 80s, and this wasn't a problem, but he would go into a town and he would get 50,000 people to show up to a stadium. And he'd have, you know, the music in the 80s was probably still very traditional Baptist hymnic stuff. Maybe the Gaithers were hanging out with him or something. I don't know. But it's like, and they would canvass the town before they would get all the churches' information. And then the people would have their altar call. And at that point, they still actually went forward to something as opposed to scanning a QR code.
Yeah.
Which is what happened at the thing. But here's the thing. There are going to be people there is literally going to be people who will look back to that moment in their life and something significantly changed in how they relate to God. That's just, I can't say that didn't happen for a lot of people that at Charlie Kirk's thing. So what do we do with that? What do we do that Bishop Barron was there? What do we do that there was all sorts of people? What does that mean? And, you know, Paul used the word metagelical, but my biggest thing is that what Billy Graham did is like these people would have that experience. And then all the churches they would go back to, by and large, were traditional Protestant churches. And that's what would be formed in their traditions with that faith that was that moment, that kind of revivalistic thing. But then they would go back to these Protestant churches and Catholic churches, probably, you know, even at that time. And it's like, or that would happen on TV sometimes, but they would be going to their, you know, mom and pop church in nowhere, Arkansas, you know, but they would hear the gospel from Billy Graham and it would make sense. And the problem that happened is when we decided to make every Sunday a Billy Graham crusade.
Yep.
And that changed everything. And it actually broke down relationality in churches. And when you moved, and you talked about your dad being involved in SCA, so you kind of understand parachurch ministry in a pretty specific way. It's like, that is like frontier ministry. Like that is when, when America was trying to be the frontier, they were trying to settle the frontier, and the Presbyterian Church would only send seminarians from like Princeton out to the frontier. They didn't want to just send lay missionaries. They wanted educated people to bring the church there. And there was a presbytery in Kentucky called Cumberland Presbytery that said, we're not waiting on you guys. We're just going to send people to share the gospel in the frontier. And so they just had lay people go out, and that created a whole nother church in the Presbyterian. And they're actually kind of Arminian, and no surprise, but it's like, but it's really interesting because, you know, but then it's kind of the same thing. Like there are no church buildings in the, you know, West, you know, in Arizona or even Oklahoma. Like it was like, you know, it was a guy preaching, you know, from maybe the back of his covered wagon or something. It's like,
right. Okay.
But then there's like, you know, so that's one piece, but the Billy Graham thing. And then you try to make every church service a Billy Graham crusade. And it is, the evangelicalism is about the good news, the message. And so what I see at Charlie Kirk's thing was there being the true spirit of evangelion happening. But there's no icons. The only icons you see. So if you can't get past Billy, if you only stay at Billy Graham, you will only ever see Billy Graham as an icon. If you only stay at Chris Tomlin, you will only see Chris Tomlin as an icon. You will only see Charlie Kirk's picture on the stage because there was no real Christian symbolism. And that's normal in when we've laid that back onto the seeker movement and back onto the stuff. And so I just think that is what the problem is, that a decision to follow Christ is then said, and let's just keep going to camp every Sunday for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And we had some friends visit our church a few weeks ago, and they had gone to, another church in town that was much more like that. And they were like, the wife just came up to me. I've known her for so many years. And since her husband is one of my best friends since we were like 14. And she was like, are we just like going to go to church camp the rest of our lives? And I was like, oh, interesting. Are we ever going to get a chance to grow up?
Yep.
And I think that's part of the impetus of what you're feeling. And it's like, because I was at a church, I was hired because a church started in our town in the early 2000s. And they actually brought me on at 16 to lead worship because they were playing Chris Tomlin off the music player. And they were like, we want somebody real. And I was like the only person in our town that was doing that. So they hired me. And I, have thoughts about hiring 16-year-olds to lead churches, but that's a thought for another day. But the other thing too was like, because of all those lusty things you were talking about earlier. And so it's like, okay, beside the point, the reason that church started is because a football coach in our town went to the State Baptist youth camp, and there were 2,000 kids singing these worship songs. And he's like, where are these people going to go? And so it's like, we need to make a church that will meet them at this. And that was like, the worship wars and everything else. But it's like, as I look back and I think about that, at the expense of passing a tradition down and an identity down. But there's something to the lowest common denominator of pop culture Christianity related to evangelism, that I think that there is something about that. Because why was Bishop Barron calling Charlie Kirk, a Christian that died? And why was he saying he's an evangelical? And why, and what was it about? Because it's the broadest, lowest common denominator. Like,
yeah,
how many Catholics listen to K-Love?
Right.
A lot.
That's actually been a struggle for me as we're looking at a conversion into these older faith traditions. Is like, what do you do with? Oh, who's that guy that y'all like to listen to a lot?
Josiah Queen.
Josiah Queen. And what do you do with
the kids? Love it. I've
Christian pop culture. What do you do with the Christian pop culture?
Yeah, because the kids love that music, right? Like she listens to it a lot. What do you do with the K-Love?
It's better than the other stuff that's on.
Because the Orthodox would say,
secular music.
What would they say?
That's not worship.
Well, and so
I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. If that's not worship, that's what I've called worship my whole life. What do you mean that's not worship?
I would say it's. Well, go ahead.
Oh, it's probably not. Oh, okay. The thing you said about like meeting them where they are in that. In the last year, I've looked at him in the anger stage, and said, if Jesus is gonna meet me where I'm at, I'll be at Chili's with a plate of cheese fries, and we can have a conversation. But
communion, that's the Eucharist,
right? Okay, so
whoa.
But then we go
a fractal of the
fractal. Yeah, well, I mean, isn't it all?
But at the same time, if I'm at Chili's with a bucket of cheese fries, that would be delicious right now. And
I'm thinking about it. It's already closed. Right?
We're having this conversation. He is there. So how to marry that with the mess that's going on in evangelicalism is really hard for me.
Yeah. One of the most interesting feedbacks I've gotten on this is to my conversation with Eric, who has a really cool YouTube channel. His dad's a pastor at a mega church in Southern California, and he's Baptist, but he's very Pageauian and Petersonian in how he's even teaching Bible studies at his church. And he's like, the worship is music and communion is the hardest part for me. It's like the community's there, like the trust is there. And he's like, but the crazy thing is I can like listen to these songs in my car. And he's like, and I can, but at church, it doesn't connect. And I was this guy that's been commenting on my channel for a long time. He's got a YouTube channel. It was like about weight loss, but his name's Butter Bob Briggs or something like that. It's around the corner. He's Orthodox. And he said, on one of my Charlie Kirk things that I did, he was like, I've been listening, or it was on Twitter, maybe. He responded to something I wrote on Twitter, because I've kind of fleshed some of these ideas out on Twitter. But I was like, he said, I've been listening back to those songs from the Charlie Kirk Memorial over and over again. And I'm like, what is this? What is that thing? And why are so many, even like people that are rad trad people I see on Twitter, like excited about Charlie Kirk's memorial service? And I even had another guy that was like, he's got a cool YouTube channel called Creed and Canon and Creed, Protestant Apologetics. And I've engaged with him a little on X before. And he was like, hot take, like they should be not doing this on the Lord's Day, and there should be, a sermon and sacrament, a word and sacrament, or something like that. And I was like, they're evangelicals. What are you trying to hold them to? What are you trying to hold them to? Like, let them be and focus on, if you think this is right, then you need to call the people that are, and that's one of these big questions between Protestantism and evangelicalism. And I like to actually make that distinction pretty clear, because I think that doing the work of evangelism is what kind of was happening, but it was not. And I think that like the music is evangelistic in a sense. And Chris Tomlin gets up there and he's basically, saying like one of the only things he said is just that Jesus is Lord of all. Like, I'm okay with it. Are you okay with that? I'm okay with that. Like, what do you
can't argue there, right?
Yeah. And you're like, but, and I think that there's one of the reckonings that we're going to have to in the near future with all of this, like you were saying, 10 to 15 years is, and this goes back to kind of a Petersonian, Pageauian like hierarchy of meaning and value, but we have to figure out the right place for that. Like, and there's like a right place. And the way that I've tried to frame it is something like concert and carnival on Friday night is right. Conference on Saturday, brunch and conference on Saturday, like TED Talk and some pop is right.
Right.
And then like something reverent and holy at the highest on Sunday. And it's not that these things that that they don't have like their proper place. Like when I went to the Symbolic World Summit, a Friday night was Martin Shaw telling a story. And then it was Neil deGrasse and this, rock opera stuff. And I was like, and then Saturday was all conferencey. And then Sunday, a bunch of them went to liturgy. Yeah. I was like, that just seems to make sense. Like something seems to make sense about that. And without kind of like getting into this Martin Luther, like, oh my gosh, modern worship, I was just hate myself. Like, oh, what do I, like, that's probably not good, like, yeah, like you said, like I went to a 24-hour worship music vigil, and I think, to your point about self, like, because of the sola fide mentality, divorced from history and tradition, is how I would put that. You get this thing where like if you're in anything short of sin will do to reach you. Okay. So like, and what does that mean? That means that we will like, evangelicalism is offering the message, right? This is the message. This is the good news. And so if all you're doing is receiving, you're consuming. Here it is in the song. Here it is in the message. Here it is. And worship, an act of worship that you already outlined is like, there has to be something. I think the Greek is kenotic. I think it's self-giving. There has to be something offering. Mm-hmm. And so, in a liturgical frame, there's like a call and there's a response. And every part of the liturgy is a call and a response. The message and, a confession and a response, a sermon and a response, the meal and a response, benediction and doxology. And so it's like, to me, helping the world like see that pattern more clearly, because it's obfuscated right now with the feels, as you said earlier. Mm-hmm. And as somebody that has been a practitioner of this stuff, was for most of my life, and now it's like, not everybody's in that position, and so to push that out into the world in a certain way. But I do think that finding a place that honors that form, and being like, I could maybe journey with these people. Maybe they have the bones here, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it's not capital O or the dot. This is the right, but maybe the bones are there, and there's a community that, they might be a little older, but that's actually an opportunity for leadership. That's an opportunity, this is kind of the Redeemed Zoomer thing, but it's kind of the opportunity for you having to be able to have an impact and invite people into something, and breathe life into a place, like you were saying, that some of the places, depending on where you're going. But that's my spiel. Go be Orthodox if you want to. Don't hear me say don't do that. I've a wonderful Orthodox friends.
Yeah, I think that there is a call to more. Like, if you look at the missionaries that from like Orthodoxy, right? They many of them put themselves in tremendous amounts of danger to take the gospel, to take Orthodoxy to people that did not know it, and they were doing everything short of sin. They were doing that, but that's not where they left people. That's not where their intention wasn't to just convert and then move to the next person. Their intention was to teach the way, to cultivate, to grow, and to instill practice, instill ritual, instill religion that deepens you, that puts you on the path to sainthood,
an identity
that gives you that identity.
Yeah.
And while the spirit of, hey, I want to share the gospel with you is great, we cannot leave it there.
Yeah.
It cannot just be conversion and now you go back to work. You go back to living your life.
Yeah.
There needs to be, that's why Paul remained, the apostle Paul remained invested in Timothy, Titus, and many others. Very likely many, many others whose names we don't know. And we have specific instruction in Scripture to Timothy to continue the practice, continue the way. So for me, I think that you framed that really nicely, and your framing there really helped me. So thank you. I think there's nothing wrong with us singing some Charlie Hall around a campfire to celebrate the truth that we have, the lives that we have because of our identities being found in Christ. There's nothing wrong with it. And then we'll drive to Chicago for a conference, right? So we'll participate in that on Saturdays, but Sundays we need to, as I believe, and I'm starting to really come to being willing to vocalize this. Sundays are holy. There needs to be a holy day.
Yeah.
And there's people who will argue what day that should be of the week, which is fine. Have that argument. I'm not there yet, but there needs to be a holy day that we approach things with reverence to truly understand, and it very likely should be sacramental and liturgical.
Yeah, and that's the thing about, is Sunday is Sunday where the optimal outsourcing of evangelism? I think that's kind of the thing. And so then I'm an evangelical, or this is the evangelical movement, or Big Eva. That to me is kind of the spirit of the age in a sense, and it becomes all about reach as opposed to about like the things you were saying, like away and identity and all that, those things. And there's people that are, kind of pushing, Comer, practicing the way, there's these elements within that movement, there always have been with other mystics and stuff, Willard and Richard Foster and others, but it's very hard It's a very, very powerful, and I think that's one of the things about it is that it's so powerful. The technique is so powerful, and I know it very well, and that's why I actually respect it. Like, there's a reason that those guys make a lot of money. There's a reason. It's very powerful, and it's its own thing. And so, but there's also like questions of like, I mean, here's the interesting thing. Like, one of the tweets I made was like, I don't think people understand that someone was making like, how did they do that in a week? How in the world could they organize something like that in a week? And I said, you don't understand that this was just another Tuesday for Big Eva and Turning Point USA. This was just another Tuesday. Like Carrie Job, and Brandon Lake and everybody else, like in their in-ears, they're getting tracks fed to them. They're getting like, hey, the guys are probably, they didn't even have iPads. It was like they were probably telling them Nashville number system in their ear so that everybody knew like what chords to go, where we were headed. Like, it was like nothing. All of that is a Tuesday to make that happen. And I think that to the point where that is, a strength in a sense that it was like for them to get up to proclaim something true about the gospel is actually incredible. Like that can be that clear, and it was clear. I think and so it's like that has to be recognized, but also you look at that and you look at and even I think part of the, I would even say maybe the envy of people that aren't in power anymore that looked at that thing and they're like wondering why, well, that there's like, they're the ones with power. And even if you're in an evangelical, you look at like, look how powerful we are. And let's bring that into the church and let's be that. I think that is, well, it's not healthy. And as somebody that was told like, well, this church has that and this church has that and we have you, like, what? Like, that's where I'm coming from. And so I feel you guys, and I agree with you. And you got, y'all, I had no idea this was where this conversation was going to go based off of y'all's video. And so I'm like, I could talk much longer on this, but we've been going for like over 2 hours. And so I think that we need to wrap this up. So like, is there anything else, or is there something you would like to say to people watching in the corner, like anything like that as a final word for our time together tonight?
You have anything? I think that the phrase that we used on that first video, and this is probably something that we'll use for, regardless of what videos look like that we continue to make. We use the phrase "getting spouses off couches," and I honestly, like, I think that there's room for that. Like, we want to present that this is an option that we can all participate, right? And then hopefully bringing that idea of that potluck dinner being the estuary protocol, that we're just bringing ourselves, we're bringing our ideas, our thoughts, our fears, our pains, like whatever concepts are in mind to this group to discuss and pursue something together. And I think that we're even the TLC, even Paul, and even at Midwestuary, we were hesitant to name, what is that something? What is that? What is that spirit? What are we actually pursuing here? But we're pursuing each other. We're pursuing the laying down of ourselves to share and participate. And I would encourage those spouses who are lurking, who are interested, who when their spouses watches your video or watches one of Luke's or Paul's videos or Jordan Hall's or one of the others and is interested, get involved. Like, have that conversation with your spouse, and then maybe it's not so bad to participate together, and there's something to be gained there, because I think that there has been something to be gained there for us.
Can I add something to that?
Yep.
When we were like one of the first days we were in Chicago, we had been talking to Paul, and it helped me a lot because going in, I had done more of like studying. Okay, I've got to watch a whole bunch of videos to figure out what in the world I'm about to get myself into, instead of already kind of having an idea. And he was like, no, I want to hear what you have to say. And I'm like, why? Me? No, that's his job, right? Like, but then being in the estuary groups by myself, that was something. So everybody had something different to say, and I wanted to hear. Like, I wanted the quiet one to not to keep talking, or like keep talking, keep going. Just so I've always been really scared to speak, right? And that taught me something really big, and things like this with like, no, I don't have to think so highly of myself and be prideful and all of that, but I can say, maybe if I said it this way, just like you talked at the very beginning of the video, you can say it 6 times, and the one time is the one that helped, and so the 6th time helped, and just multiple people having conversations, and it's worth having them because I was able to learn a lot from that, and I felt like I was able to give a lot to it at the same time. So,
Yep.
As a spouse who got off the couch,
do it together. If your
together.
spouse is participating and you're not, and you're listening to this, and you've made it 2 hours and 16 minutes into this video, get in, participate. It's gonna be fine.
That was what I asked for my 40th birthday presents. My wife was like, "What do you want?" I was like, "Come do a podcast with me."
Mm-hmm.
yes.
And we've done 2, and we'll probably do more. But it's hard. Time is also a thing, and I'm like turning these things out, and so it's like it is a challenge, like you guys were alluding to earlier. But yeah, my encouragement to you guys is you when you put something on the internet, it is technically talking basically to the whole world, but the chances that it does is pretty small. And your concerns are wise to think about discerning should, and think about my kids, and but there's also wise ways to how you can approach this, to where I don't share these on my personal Facebook, but I'm not hiding. There's just that I just make the choice not to.
Right.
And so it's like so I think there's something there as we continue into this world of what does it mean to be wise in the digital landscape. And I don't know if that's something that's real, but that hasn't probably there's not great categories for about that, because there is this whole thing. It's like, well, am I trying to be an influencer? Like, who do I think I am? And it's like, well, that's not, it's like, well, but what does it mean to participate in the digital space? And certain, and like, there's the metaverse, and there's the, what is this? And I feel like I'm plugged in the matrix right now. It's kind of weird. So there's just a lot to think about, but I think y'all are doing it, and I'm excited to have met you. And hopefully I wasn't too much of a blowhard on this conversation, but you guys, like, I was like, boy, I thought we were talking about masculinity and rural revival, and then all of a sudden we're talking about like ecclesial anxiety. I'm like, okay, let's go there. So
yeah,
it's been really good, and I'm glad that Neil connected us, and that y'all were excited or wanted to share your stories, and go in there with the corner and everybody, and look forward to seeing how people connect with what y'all have said. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hey, anytime. Would love to do it again sometime.
I'm sure it'll happen. All right, man. We'll talk again. Hang around backstage, and we'll close this thing out. That's what I usually say. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.